All right, good evening, everyone. It's good to see that we have another audience out there again after some months in Zoom meetings. So I'll call to order the Holt Board of Education meeting for Monday, October 19th, 2020. And I call to order the meeting with one board member absent, Ms. Amy Dalton, who has told us that she is caring for a family member in a medical condition, and she'll be back next month. So with that, Dr. Hornak, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Board, the mission of Holt Public Schools is to innovate, educate, and inspire, empowering all students to make a positive impact in their communities. The vision of Holt Public Schools is to empower our learning community to make a positive impact on the world.
Thank you, Dr. Hornak. Who was a paraeducator in our district, and this week, unfortunately, she passed due to a car accident. Thank you, and if you could keep her and her family in your prayers, that would be helpful. And Dr. Hornak, and board, as you know, last month, or actually it was last month, it was a couple weeks ago, we added a new sixth board member to the board, Dr. Leonard, who is down at the end, and with the help of Dr. Hornak, we're going to swear Dr. Leonard in, and he's going to take the oath of office for the board.
I, Kevin Leonard, do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of a member of the Board of Education of Holt Public Schools according to the best of my ability.
Which brings us to changes to and additions to the agenda. Board members, we are going to move 5.7 to new business on the agenda, and I believe that's the only change we have this evening.
Is this where we ask for changes to the consent agenda?
Not quite yet.
All right.
We'll get there.
I just have one.
Okay. But next on our agenda is the public comment, and for the public, for anyone who would like to address the board, this is your time to do so. But please remember, this is not a dialogue between the board members and yourself. However, we may follow up with you at a later date. There is a 5-minute time limit per speaker. We ask that you be courteous. We also ask that you do not use any employees or student's name in your comments. And Ms. Bureau, if anybody's signed up, if you want to call them.
Sally Hawk Harrison.
Thank you.
packaged, the fruits and vegetables, and all of that. It's just absolutely been wonderful. So keep up the good work. The other two children go to Wilcox, and they are struggling with the Chromebooks. They are struggling to be on the right time, to get it loaded, to get it this, to get it that. And you say I can't mention names of teachers or any of that, but I'll tell you, gold star teacher for kindergarten class and a gold star teacher for second grade that are very interactive with these kids and very loving and kind and still creating a sense of classroom activity. It's absolutely been wonderful to see, but these kids are struggling. They really want to be back in school. And of course, the little kindergartner, you know, she's never been to school, so she doesn't know what it's all about, kind of thing. And I just want to go to school and make friends. I just want this, I just want that. Why can't we go? Why can't we this? And the 7-year-old, the second grader, is quite techy, but he doesn't want to do the work. But he was able to bypass some limits and download a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle video instead of watching the classroom video. So I don't know what kind of curriculum or IT or whatever needs to be put on the Chromebooks, but there needs to be something, especially if we really aren't going to go back in class this year, this school year. If they aren't going to go back November, they aren't going to go back January, they aren't going to go back. Something's got to be done for the limits on the Chromebooks, because there's been a couple other incidents that this little guy has done. And it's just very odd that he doesn't want to do the schoolwork, but he can do the techie part of it. So that's all I got. You guys are great. It's good to see you. And keep doing the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bureau, do we have anyone else?
That is all we have for pre-signed up.
And if there's anyone else that'd like to address the board? If not, I'm going to close public comments. So next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Dr. Hallgren, this is...
It's just a small change, and plus I wanted to see how the system worked. Can we take a look at 4.5? Pop that out.
Yep. That's the minutes of the special meeting on September 30th.
Right. So do you want to do the consent agenda first and then do that?
Is there something on there that you want to pull out? And
It's just in 4.5 there was just a number error. There was a mention about 81,000, which isn't a number. It should be 81 million for the previous bond. I don't know if anyone else noticed it, but it just kind of jumped out at me. So.
What page?
Oh, I don't have it open. It was talking about the previous bond, and it's just the number should be.
I think page 16, under public comment.
I'm getting there.
Ben's public comment.
Yeah, what Mr. Bakken was saying under public comment.
Did you say it was in public comment?
Yeah,
Okay.
it says it's in reference to the last bond, which was 81 million. It's in that number is not the same as what is in the agenda or in the minutes.
I've made a note of it, and I will change that to be 81 million.
Okay, I think it was 81 million. Kim, you might want to check me on that, but I knew it wasn't. I knew it wasn't 810,000.
Right. So
I apologize.
with including interest, it was 81 million. We had only borrowed 76,500,000. We had gone back to do that. Yep, you were correct.
all right, with the correction to 4.5, I would entertain a motion then to the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion on the consent agenda, noting the change in 4.5. Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion approved. So we move to reports, and this evening, Ms. Cosgrove, I don't know if you want to do those introductions for us. We have the presentation of our annual audit.
Sure. I would like you to, I do believe that our finance committee had already met with our representative from Maynard Costerison, but this is Jeff Staley. He is our partner. So, and actually he was here on the only day the auditors came in. So we had kind of locked them in one large room, and they were all socially distanced, but they did our audit the first year, and they did it remotely. It must have been quite an endeavor.
All right, well, thank you, Kim, for the introduction. I greatly appreciate it, and I greatly appreciate having the opportunity to come talk to you guys in person. I agree with you, Mr. Perry. Getting tired of the Zoom meetings, getting tired of the team meetings, so it's nice to actually see some faces. You know, half of it's covered up. So, but thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I do think it's important for us being our first year here as the auditors, so you can put a name with a face. I think that's really important. So we did put a PowerPoint together. Figured it would be a little bit easier for you to kind of go through some of the highlights of the financial statements instead of trying to flip through the report. So we put in some highlights here for the year activities. So overall, the audit went very smooth. Like Kim said, we got thrown a curveball a little bit this year with the closures and trying to do an audit remotely. But Kim and her team did a really good job for us. It's probably one of our best first-year engagements we've had. She was very well prepared, had all the information ready for us, and I'm sure she got tired of some of the emails requesting stuff, but her and her team are right on top of getting us what we need. So, which lead us to overall, I think the district has a very strong management team, especially during the year of uncertainty this year, and it do show some very strong financial statements. So we did outline what we do for 2019 and 20. Saying 19 and 20 was an unusual year was probably a little bit of an understatement. Some of the things the districts had to deal with was COVID-19 and the school closures, state funding cuts that happened in August, even though your final budget had to be approved by June. New federal funding with little to no guidance on how to spend it, and I think today there's still little and no guidance on how to spend it. You had a bond refunding. Oh yeah, and by the way, you had new auditors. If you only implemented Get 84 early, you would have had everything particularly possible for a district would have happened this year. So again, saying this year was a little bit unusual is a little bit of an understatement, but you came through with flying colors. What we did here was we tried to outline, like I mentioned, particular pages of the audit report. The independent auditor's report, it can be found on pages 1 through 3. Very consistent wording to what you've seen in the past, but on page 2 is the independent auditor's opinion, which we issued an unmodified opinion. It is the highest level of assurance that we can provide as auditors, and it's commonly referred to as a clean audit report. Pages 4 through 11 is the management discussion and analysis. We do highly recommend you spend some time looking at the MD&A. We think it provides a very good overview of the current year activities. But on page 8, we are able to put a summarization, comparative of the statement of net position. This is on the full accrual base, or commonly referred to as the for-profit presentation. Did I go too far? Oops. Sorry, I hit the button one too many times. So this is on the statement of net position, like I mentioned. It's on the full accrual basis. So it's on page 7. Total assets and deferred outflows did decrease a little bit from last year. It was $86.8 million last year and $83.8 million this year, so you had a little bit of a decrease on the asset side of it. That's because depreciation of the fixed assets outpaced the additions this year. You did see a decrease in the total liabilities and deferred inflows. That decreased a little bit this year. It was $198.2 million last year and $96 million this year. You did see a little bit of a reprieve on the OPEB, or the retiree health expense. Pension did go up this year. We'll look at that as we get into some of the notes of the financial statements. But the biggest impact is your long-term obligations decreased, and that was getting rid of that swap interest rate agreement. So the debt position at the end of the year is at a deficit of $91 million compared to $86 million last year. And the main cause for that is because of the legacy cost, the pension and the retiree health. Pretty much 99.9% of the districts across the state are in a negative net position because of the pension and the retiree health. Okay. Page 8 is the comparative statements of changes in net position, again on a full accrual basis. For the year, the district dipped into net position by about $4.9 million. Like we mentioned, the main cause of that is because of the increase in the pension liability, as well as the interest rate swap termination fee for that. Pages 15 through 16 is the balance sheet on a modified accrual basis, or your day-to-day bookkeeping. The general fund at the end of the year had a total fund balance of $7.3 million. You do have an unassigned fund balance of about $6.3 million, which leaves your unassigned fund balance does meet the board's minimum fund balance requirement of 10%. So well within the board guidelines of the minimum fund balance for unassigned. Page 17, the statement of changes, statement of revenue, expense, and changes in fund balance. Overall, the district fund balance did increase about $330,000. The general fund had a really solid financial performance, added a little less than $1 million to the fund balance, which says quite a bit, especially in a year of uncertainty for the finances this year. So overall, a very solid financial performance for the district. On pages 21 through 50 are the notes of the financial statements. We did go through and try to highlight some of the more important or significant footnotes. Like we mentioned earlier, the district did issue refunding bonds. That can be noted on page 35. The district took advantage of the low interest rate environment to refinance some bonds, which is going to save the taxpayer $1.2 million of total debt expenses. So very smart, prudent move for the district for the refinancing. Page 41, we do disclose the overall pension liability, and this is at the statewide level. The statewide pension is underfunded by $33.1 billion. That's an increase from last year. Last year was underfunded by $30.1 billion, which leaves the district's proportionate share of $117 million versus $107 last year. So the increase in the pension liability strictly has to do with the statewide plan. The district has no control over that. Page 43 is the retiree health obligations. The statewide statewide retiree health is underfunded by about $7.2 billion, which is an improvement from last year. Last year was underfunded by $7.9. The district's proportionate share is $25.2. The district continues to make their required monthly contributions to the plans. Page 50, we do like to let you know what's coming down the pipeline. And the first one would be GASB 84. That will be effective for this school year, and that has to deal with the fiduciary activities. And then in 2022, GASB 87, dealing with operating leases. Page 52 is the budget to actual comparison. This is kind of what we consider the decision-making page. For the end of the year, the district anticipated using up about $3.1 million fund balance. However, for the year, you're able to add a little over $1 million, a little less than $1 million this year, so you have a positive variance of $4.1 million between your budget to actual. And there's two main causes for that. The state budget cuts was not as deep as originally anticipated, so you did get an uptick on the state revenue side of it, as well as tight budgetary controls during the school closure. Page 69 is the schedule of findings and question costs. It's a really nice summarization of current year activities. It does let the reader know that we did issue an unmodified audit report. We did not know any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies over internal controls over financial reporting, as well as no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies over the federal award program. So This year, this district spent a little over $2 million of federal awards. We did test the child nutrition cluster, and we did issue an unmodified or clean audit report for that. So very solid performance right here. Just to do a quick wrap up, like I mentioned, the audit went very smooth. Kim and their team were very well prepared for that. We greatly appreciate it, so please send our thank you to them. The district has strong leadership in place, which is definitely important in these days of uncertainty. So, and we do appreciate it being of service to the district and its citizens. Any questions?
You know, I don't have a question for you, Jeff, but Ms. Casgrove, when was the last time that we achieved that fund balance of 10%? Do you know?
It would have been around 2010, 2008. So we had a fund balance over 15% in the 2008 when the last downturn in the economy. We were making $1 million cuts every year, but we were also using that in our fund balance also. So about around 2010, that is when we dipped below.
Okay, thank you. Just the only other comment I had is that budget to actual looks like, you know, we were way off, but, you know, in perspective, that was at a time when the state was changing those numbers, and it was numbered gymnastics every morning as far as what we thought we were going to get and where we were going to get cut. So, as you remember, we left that budget alone. We didn't try to chase after the numbers of where they might be. We just kind of went with that, you know, worst case scenario. So, you know, just a little more explanation to, you know, why we were off on that budget.
Well, I think you hit a great point, because the guidance the state gave you said, come up with 4 budgets and pick which one you think is the best. Oh, and by the way, the actual numbers weren't even close to what those numbers were. So it was kind of at the end of the year, it was ended up being a guessing game where they think that those cuts were going to be. So having a positive variance, especially in today's environment, is still a good victory. So, and the most important thing is you're able to control the expenses. That's probably what's the most impressive part of it, is controlling the expenses of a year of uncertainty. So,
any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to say, you know, I've sat here for a few years watching these, and they're very difficult to read, but this was very concise. It had just enough information to get the point across, so it was perfect. It's perfect for a non-CPA to read this.
so we met our objective. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.
And also thank Nick for us, too.
Pardon me?
And Nick, was he your senior manager on the job?
Yep, Nick Caceres, yep.
Okay, good.
Do you need a motion, Mr. Perry?
We would accept the audit. We can't approve it. So if you would like to make a motion to accept the audit.
Yeah, I would move that we accept the audit as presented, and thank you for your work.
I'll second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is our 2021 bond update. And I'll ask Dr. Pornick to do those introductions for us.
Yes, I'm happy to start the introductions tonight. Our owner's rep is taking the podium right now. This is Mr. Ted Moore from Moore Trosper. And then I imagine he's going to also introduce the additional bond partners in the room. We have the dream team here tonight, and we're very excited to share where we've been and where we're going.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Just want to say thank you for having us here tonight, and what exciting times in Holt Public Schools that we're embarking on, and what we have in front of us is some generations to come are going to be thanking us for, you know, the opportunity to improve the schools and the learning institution and the community as a whole, because this is where the foundation starts for our building process, is right here with you folks. And I can't say it enough that how important this is to plan for the future of our children and move forward and make such an impact on everything that we're doing, and the countless hours that the board, Dr. Hornak, Kim, Christine, Rick Brown, and the project partners have put into it, thousands of hours to date so far. We've engaged principals, teachers, directors, community. We really have put forth a tremendous effort. And our Tuesday morning meetings, we try scheduling for an hour, but they last 2 hours, and then we stretch them out to 2.5 hours. And the conversation is such that nobody wants to leave because there's such great ideas getting bounced around and great ideas. What we're up against today, and I know we have a PowerPoint I'm going to turn over to Jeff at GMB, and we're going to kind of go through some scenarios for you folks. And, you know, in my opinion, I think we've landed on just over 8 mils is the number we're looking at for the need. Option number 3 in here is kind of a hybrid. Holt Public Schools, we're going to change things a little bit is what we're looking at, obviously with your guys' approval, but you know, to take off an old school that's almost 100 years old and bring some new buildings in and freshen up the community and safe workplaces and school environments is hugely important. The safety and security, pickup and drop-offs is all things that we really need to start paying attention to, especially in the climate we're living in today. So part of this presentation today, Jeff's going to show you the bond pillars, which is our playbook for the project. It's kind of the live document that evolves constantly throughout every meeting. As information is gathered and generated, it gets updated into the playbook. And I think you're going to find that, you know, the tremendous effort people are putting together. And I just wanted to share with you guys that I think the 148 million is the way to go, in my opinion. I think that's not going to meet every need the district has, but it's also going to give you guys a little elasticity in the program, because what we're looking at today, you're looking at fulfilling needs that are 5 years past already. So now we're going to be another 2 years out possibly before money is funded. So it could change a little bit. So we have to make sure you as a board understands that what we see today might be just a little bit different tomorrow. So have that vision, have that forward look, and at this point I'll turn it over to Jeff with GMB and let him walk through the presentation and walk you guys through the work that our teams have done and assembled for you today. I thank you so much for inviting us over today to share with you all the information, and I await your decision. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ted. Good evening, board members. It's really great to see you all in person. I guess this is sort of like an in-person meeting. It's a little bit different still yet, but happy to be here and happy to be in the district. As Ted said, we're going to take you through, again, as before when we gave you an update, to kind of, I don't think we want to undervalue process, right, and the work that goes into how we arrive at some of these different options. So just sort of moving through the presentation here, you know, just like we do with our Tuesday morning meetings, we start with schedule because, you know, schedule rules. We've got a really hard deadline coming up here in December with the Department of Treasury. And so the goal here is to say, what are the steps that we need to put in place in order to make sure that we make it to that Treasury meeting with a strong recommendation and a package that, you know, reflects all the needs for public schools. So that's kind of the overall timeline. You know, we're solidly in the middle to end of October, and you know, I think we feel like we're sort of honing in on some exciting options to talk about. The next piece Ted did allude to are the bond pillars. So again, for those of you that have participated in previous meetings and some of the other community task force meetings and other engagement activities, really the 4 areas that we're concentrating on as we look at scope and as we develop options and understand needs are critical infrastructure, safety and security, learning environments, and innovation. And I think what, again, as I said before, that really allows us to kind of frame the conversation a little bit, and it allows us to organize and categorize things as we're evaluating different buildings. And you know, to me, the innovation portion of this is exciting because it's really open-ended, and hopefully what you'll see tonight, I think, really speaks to how, you know, that portion, that bond pillar is kind of crept into the process for us. You know, looking back on some of the activities, you know, we've been continuing to dive into the facilities assessment. It's a couple 100-page document, and there's a lot of great data in there, and that really helps us to sort of understand and get our arms around those infrastructure needs. So continuing to do that. We actually spent all day last Friday walking through buildings and meeting with principals to get better eyes on things and making sure that what we're seeing is consistent with what's in the reports. Continued around those conversations of safety and security. Those visits really allow us to see and understand some of those challenges associated with things like pickup and drop off, and how are we getting kids into the building, and how close are these buildings to the street, and how do we get traffic off the street, and things like that. So really no substitute for those experiences of talking to the principals who we know are out there with orange vests every day and megaphones trying to keep traffic flowing through the sites. Obviously had some principal engagement, some engagement with Holt Public Schools directors, community task force. You guys saw some of the outcomes of that, I think, at the last update. And last week we did have an opportunity to interact with HEAT on not one but two occasions. So we got to meet with the HEAT chair meeting, and then the following day, the whole group meeting, we got to interact as well. And what we did kind of a similar engagement exercise, again virtual, but the Ideas That Stick exercise that many of you got to participate in and saw some of the outcomes of the community task force. We also did this with the HEAT group, and we treated it a little bit different. Rather than sort of leading them directly through the bond pillars, we developed three driving questions that really sort of speak to the heart of the work that HEAT's trying to do. And really tried to get them to talk about, what does equity and access look like in Holt Public Schools? How do the facilities either support or deter that? And what does that look like in the future? So what you can see here are a snapshot of the comments that we got out of those 2 days. And it was actually really cool to see as we took it up to that level to say, let's ask those driving questions. We still got a lot of feedback that was consistent with some of the other feedback around safety and security, accessibility, level of investment across the district. I think that's something that we've talked a lot about in terms of, you've got a lot of buildings that are a lot of different vintages, varying conditions and things like that. So what does it mean to invest in one facility and not invest in another facility? So those are some of the highlights, and some of the key takeaways. But, at the end of the day, just a lot of consistent information with information we've gotten from other stakeholders as well. So, I think it's really cool to see how those things come together as we engage a diverse population across the district. The next slide, this is again something that you're familiar with, just as a reminder how we started this process. As we started to think about all of these different needs, we attacked them in two different ways. One was looking directly at what are those needs, what are those critical infrastructure pieces, those existing things that need to be replaced because they're on the verge of wearing out or are worn out. And if you remember, that number district-wide of that 0 to 6 year need that was identified was approximately $91 million. As we evaluated different scenarios relative to financial options and, millage rate reductions and things like that, the top portion of that, or that sort of lighter shade, was dedicated to, some of those other programmatic things like safety and security, things like furniture and equipment, things like 21st century media centers. And what does it mean to not just invest in the infrastructure of these buildings, but, how to really turn them into buildings that they need to be now for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And so, again, just a reminder of where we were, and sort of if we invest in those basic infrastructure needs, what does that leave us to do some of those other parts and pieces that we discussed. So where that brings us tonight are three options that we're bringing you to discuss, how we might start to tackle these buckets, or how we might start to assemble a package together that addresses the needs at each building. So bond option one, we thought it was kind of an obvious place to look at the existing facilities and say, let's evaluate all the infrastructure needs on that 0 to 6 year scale, which, remember, was about that $91 million number that we identified. And then, again, the beginning of the work that we did was really sort of focused around what are the safety and security needs, what are some of these educational programming needs, furniture. We know there's a need to potentially add a couple of gymnasiums at your elementary schools that don't have those spaces, so they have a hard time supporting the two, whether it's lunch and connects at the same time, and some of the challenges with that. So in this case, we said, what does it look like to add those? And really, as we put together the package, wish list items from the athletics side, from the performing arts side, actually some things in this space that we're in tonight. And what we see is a package that's right at about $140 million. And that's, again, that's your district as it is. It's maintaining your buildings in the configuration that they currently are. Same grade levels, similar student capacities, and saying that we're going to put a level of investment in each one of those buildings, again, for the next 30, 40, 50 years. That was option one. And if you guys have questions about the options, feel free to stop me along the way. I'm happy to tell you what's either in or out. There's a lot of detailed lists of things that are included in each one of those facilities, just as a way to try to capture, the extent of the work that we're proposing.
So on this proposal, there is no money for renovations to the junior high auditorium?
That is correct. Other than if it, things identified in the facilities assessment, but no specific, lighting and sound things in the junior high auditorium.
Thank you.
Correct. Yep. Option 2, and this says option 2.1 because we actually had several option 2s, but we said let's bring one forward. What you're seeing on the maps here, just from a process standpoint, what we tried to capture with this map is to really capture the catchment of the district, right? Because the facilities matter, but also the geography matters. And part of us coming to speed and trying to understand, how the district flows is what are some transportation challenges? Where do you have population density that allows students to walk to certain buildings? At what point do you have to start to bus them? And so we find that the geographic map helps to sort of identify, what does it look like to flow into the district as an elementary student based on where you live, and then how do you move through the district geographically as you enter middle school, as you enter junior high, and as you enter the high school. So you'll see some of these bubbles, trying to capture some of the movement and things like that. But really what we did was with option 2 was we started to look at Holt as sort of a pivotal facility. And we said, what if, in this case, Hope is not the Hope that we currently know of it, and that we're actually replacing that building. We know that's a building that's nearing 100 years old. It's got a lot of needs. We identified about $17 million worth of needs between the facilities assessment number and some of the programmatic things. So, the thought there is that if we left Hope in its current position, we'd be spending about $17 million on that building. And probably unsure whether or not we could solve some of those more critical things that we identified, like traffic flow. Can we get cars off the street? Can we create the parking? Can we create a safe pedestrian experience for students? And so in this case, what we said, what does it look like if we rebuild Hope? And in this case, we're saying we're rebuilding Hope probably in its current site. We don't know exactly what it looks like, but in this case, we're probably building less of a building than what there is now. That's nearly 130,000 square feet. If we would propose building a building in this case, it's probably more closely resembles Washington Woods. So you've got some parity in terms of building size, and you've got some, student populations and things like that. So that's the big move in this case that we're showing. What it allows us to do is it allows us to pull that $17 million worth of needs that we identified off the table and push that toward, new construction, which is probably more like a $25, $26 million project. It forced us, in terms of looking at the dollar thresholds to probably pull back on some of those other needs that were identified. We had to, in this case, pull back on some of the athletics wish list items a little bit. We had to pull back on the lighting that we've got in this facility. But just to kind of get more granular with the projects and say, okay, if we're going to make this work within the thresholds that we're talking about, and in this case, it's about $145 million. That's the big move in the case of bond option 2. Any questions about option 2. All right. Move on to the, again, so just to restate, this configuration looks exactly like the configuration that you have right now. You know, we would not propose changing any grade level transitions. All of your elementary buildings would be K-5 buildings. You'd have 2 middle schools, you'd have a junior high, and you'd have a high school. Moving on to the next option. So in this option, we decided to push it a little bit further. And, you know, I think I heard from day one, you know, the 2 biggest challenge buildings that we talked about as a result of the assessment are Holt and Diamonddale. And so we started to look at this and say, what does it look like to actually construct a new Diamonddale? And, you know, what do you do with Hope? And what does that mean? And it really started to drive us to think about our different configurations. So, you know, I talked about the K4, the 5-6, the 7-8, the 9-12. And in this case, we said, what does it look like if we turn your elementaries back to a K-5 district? And then rather than having a junior high, we have 2 middle schools that are 6 through 8. And then we have more of that traditional 9 through 12 experience. And so it forced us to look at Diamonddale and say, okay, we might need to build a building that's a little bit bigger than your other elementary buildings to support that K-5 enrollment. We actually might need to do that with another elementary building as well. So as we look down the list at the needs, you know, the dollars per square foot that jumped out at us the most in terms of needs that we would need to invest in the building were Elliott. And so what we're bringing to you in this option is to say, what if we reconstructed Diamonddale and reconstructed Elliott? Probably as 4-section buildings is where we're looking right now. You know, once we get enrollment projection information and understand what your long-term looks like, we'll sort of fine-tune that. But those are really the big moves to say, those are 2 new elementary schools sort of anchoring the west side of the district and the east side of the district. You know, all that money that we would put in Hope, we would actually not do that. We would propose to divest in Hope and turn the junior high building into a 6-7-8 building and turn Washington Woods into a 6-7-8 building. Now, obviously, that means that we would have to add some classroom space to Washington Woods in order to do that. The junior high has plenty of space for that 6-7-8 population with a number of teaching stations that we've got. You know, one of the other big things that we've talked about relative to the high school campus is saying, what does it look like to bring 12th graders back to this building that we're in right now? And so, and then what does that mean for the North Campus building? So another move in this proposes that we're building academic additions here at this building to support moving the 12th graders back. And that really frees up the North Campus building as an opportunity to really become kind of an innovation center. And what does that mean? I don't exactly know yet, but I think it's an opportunity to look at online portal. It's an opportunity to look at, you know, some of the dual enrollment early college programs. You know, a lot of the programs that you actually have over there right now may continue to live there. But I think it also opens some space to offer some other innovative programs. Maybe it allows you to expand your robotics programming. Maybe it allows you, you know, to do some of those other things that are out there that you know, the district wants to pursue. But in terms of a central location, in terms of your ability to amp up innovation and provide programming that, you know, you are not now, or continue to build on the programming that you're offering. So a lot of moves here. We're still investing the majority of the needs identified in the elementary buildings. We did have to pull back on those a little bit, but we're focusing on things like the 0 to 6 year facilities needs. We're still bringing in safety and security to those buildings, updating playgrounds, adding air conditioning, making sure that we're touching classroom furniture across the district. And we are proposing to add the Horizon and Wilcox gymnasiums in order to make sure that we have equity in programming throughout those buildings. You know, we know buses are something that we need to consider, so we've got some dollars in there for buses. We've got to kind of fine-tune what that dollar amount is. And then, you know, we do have some money earmarked for some athletic improvements, you know, namely, you know, we have dollars in there for a synthetic turf field right now. That doesn't mean that that's officially the thing that we're going to do in the direction that we're moving, but I think we're just trying to represent an option that sort of touches a lot of different needs that were identified, but still potentially allows you to provide a pretty significant transformation to the way the district operates. And some of the feedback that we've gotten in this option are the positives associated with one less transition through these buildings. A 2-year stint in a building and then moving on to another 2-year. Dr. Hornak said it best when he said, you really barely can know those kids in 2 years. By the time they're in their second year, they're already leaving. And so from an educational experience, especially for students that are at risk, a scenario like this represents a very positive outcome for those kids that have one less transition and get to stay in the buildings a little bit longer. I think the other positive in a scenario like this is it really invests equally in the multiple geographies of the district, right? West anchor, east anchor, and I don't know if I need to do this. Yep, okay. And it allows us to maintain that middle school experience in really the east and the west until we get to high school, which we understand is important from a walkability standpoint, from a transportation standpoint. It allows us to really hold off on busing kids until we get to 9th grade, which we understand to be an operational benefit as well. So, lots of stuff on that screen, a lot of little text. As a side-by-side comparison, I think it's important to know that, these are all very malleable options, right? We're trying to stay at a high level as we evaluate the different scenarios. But I think the goal is to just really understand, something that sticks. And if it sticks, what it allows us to do is to really hone in on some of the details. Some of the things that we don't have 100% figured out yet, we can start to tighten up the numbers. We can start to evaluate some of those other parts and pieces that move in and out of different proposals. But that's really where we are tonight.
All right, board members, do you have any questions?
Can I ask a couple questions?
Jeff?
So, what we kind of had a little sidebar about the junior high auditorium, which of course wouldn't be a junior high anymore.
Right.
But we do need another performance space. This is not a sufficient amount of space. Is that something that you guys are considering?
I think that's certainly something that we could evaluate and say, regardless, that's a district-wide, resource, right, as a secondary performance space, and we can put on the list to evaluate and say, what does it look like to bring that up to a greater level than where it's at right now?
I've got 2 more questions, one of which no one seems to have the answer to. There's a rumor that there were already footings poured for an addition to the building. Does anyone know if that happened, or is that aged out of the system?
I think Mr. Tooley did some investigation on that.
Okay, it's a persistent rumor, so. Okay, and the other question is that we talked a little bit last Tuesday about the possibility, at least I brought it up, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, about moving Washington Woods to the North Campus building. Is that something you guys have taken a chance to look at?
I almost look at if there was a decision to say, hey, we're really excited about this third option in this reconfiguration, I think we need to look at it because there is more square footage there. I mean, the North Campus building is about 110,000 square feet. We can do a teaching station count there to say how many classroom spaces do we have, and what does that look like? Can we do that without having to invest the additional classroom space at Washington Woods? I think it's certainly a viable consideration, and if this is something that kind of has some legs, I think we should consider it.
So this isn't a comment for you, but just kind of to let you guys know what the room felt like on Tuesday morning to me. It seemed that there was some general support for this idea of moving to the 3-grade system in those buildings. And we actually just heard it when we were doing our interviews this evening about transitions and how there may be a few too many transitions in the education process right now. So personally, I find myself really intrigued by this idea of moving that model. It was very interesting.
Dr. Hallgren, you could actually reduce 2 transitions. Currently, we have PK4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12, and you'd go down to PK5, 6, 8, 9, 12. That would be incredible for our students that we serve, especially our at-risk kids who we're just getting to know in those 2-year transition points, and then they move to the next building, and then they take a year to get to know them, and then another year to work with them closely, and they move out. So this would be good for kids.
Yeah, I think for a lot of our kids that they don't necessarily have the best family situations at home. School is family for them, and moving them from building to building is really breaking families up. We try to minimize that as much as possible. I think it's a good idea.
I have some questions. Is that okay?
Yes.
First of all, this is very impressive, so thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
My first question is on option 2 and 3. Is there a reason why we chose to put Holt ahead of Diamondale? Is it just the age of the building?
I think so, and I think one of the things that we look at when we do an evaluation process is there's the things that we can fix, and then there's the things that we have a much harder time fixing, and those are things like how does the building anchor the site, and Hope is it's a big challenge with traffic, and that's something that we put from day one. I don't think it's any less or more important than Diamondale. I mean, certainly we visited Diamondale, and a lot of significant challenges there as well. Similar, right? How it anchors the site, and how do we get buses in and out of that, and how do we keep kids safe as we bring them to and from the building. But I look at a piece of property like Diamondale and say you've got some opportunities there relative to the acreage and things like that you don't necessarily exist on Hope's site, just given its tighter site and tighter context.
And then on these conceptual planning drafts, I just think we have to be a little careful of how we do this, just from my perspective looking at this, because if we're going to have theater sound upgrades, we need to have theater light upgrades, and we need to have it at both locations, because what we're giving them at the junior high is not even remarkably close to what they're going to get here, so they have a better transition. And then also on this third option, if we name the sports, like the soccer press box, gymnastics is going to come back and say, why don't I get a location? Football turf field, that's going to have an explosion.
Right.
With baseball and softball is not listed, lacrosse isn't listed, wrestling's not listed. I think we need to maybe just put athletic upgrades or something like that. I mean, I would love to hear all of the options from the coaches. That would be great. The band room isn't on here. I know that they have needs and wants, and I know this is just a draft and I'm just talking through it, but when people see this, the arts aren't really incorporated. So if we could do something to incorporate that. And then back to the Diamondale and Hope. Have parents and guardians been spoken to in regards to this?
No. I mean, other than parents, actually, no, you guys as board members, so this was presented on Tuesday sort of as a small group, and then as board members, you guys are seeing this really for the first time before. We haven't really rolled out any options to the public for any engagement at this point, but that would be the next logical step, is to say, okay, let's take more concrete information, get it out to the greater community, and get some more feedback.
Okay. Yeah, I just think there's going to be some opinions on Hope versus Diamondale, so I think we might need to.
And I pushed a lot of Hope because I drive down in front of the school every day, and it's not a huge safety concern, but with all the people, it's a safe place. But I think everybody should be aware of the traffic that goes in and out of that area. And I know there's a lot of foot traffic to that area, a lot of non-bus riders that travel there, and that's kind of how Hope came front and center. But as the age of the building, there's been some conversation about an alternate use for that building. So there's all these things are under discussion. Nothing's concrete today. These are all concepts, 30,000-foot view. We want to include everybody. We appreciate all the input we've got from everybody, and our job is to collect all that data and compile it and get you guys so the board can make a decision. And I don't want to press too hard on this, but we have a schedule that I need to keep. I need to keep these folks on task. And we all know May election's coming up relatively quickly. And what we're embarking now is there's a lot of community people asking questions. And for us to get the message out properly, our timing's now. Truthfully, we really need the board to land that option for us so we can take that and continue our work. It's hugely important we get that today. So if that is a possibility this evening, that the board can render a decision on what option they like, knowing that it's a hybrid, it'll change a little bit, but pretty much it's there, what you see. With the inclusion of all the things that you mentioned, we can certainly incorporate that in our proposals and make sure that it's covered across the board. And so everybody's included. And I think that's hugely important to a yes vote ultimately at the end of the day.
I don't disagree with anything that you just said. I'm one of those people that says give us it all. But I'm so cognizant of the fact that we only have a certain amount of money. And I just want to make sure that we hit each demographic of each child that we have and educator and support staff to make this the best it can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, part of the analysis that we did, as we sort of add up all the needs that were identified, both in the programming side of it as well as the infrastructure, was to do a dollars per square foot analysis of what would it take to upgrade those buildings. So Diamond really came in the highest at about $231 a square foot. We would, as we're estimating at a high level now for the cost of a new building, we would be comparing that to about $300 a square foot, plus or minus. Elliott actually came in second place at about $208 a square foot. And so, as we asked ourselves, okay, if we were to replace two elementaries, the logical choice initially was to say, what is the building with the greatest need? What are buildings that actually have some site that might allow us to do that? And then also, let's look at growth, right? And so we talk about where are some potential housing developments and things like that that are sort of brewing out there. And growth is actually, there's some opportunities on the southeast side of the district. And so I think what that helps us sort of reinforce is, anchoring at Diamonddale and anchoring in Elliott, really hits kind of both ends of the geographic, portions of the district and allows that, and having a building at Elliott and having a building at the junior high allows for a lot of that walkability, that is currently present with Elliott and Holt in the junior high.
And we're looking at constructability as well. Like Elliott, for instance, there's enough land there, we could build a new building back behind, get that up and going and operational before the other building comes offline. So keeping out, less interruptions throughout, and possibly the same with Diamonddale as well. So it really, site logistics, those things work better into the plan. It should work really well.
Well, then you're going to take fields away from people, so be careful with that, too.
Well, then those have to be replaced somewhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is a long walk to those fields. Mm-hmm. Maybe flip-flop them. Maybe bring the fields back up front once the building's out.
Thank you.
I just find it just incredible, the difference between bond option 1 and then 3, as far as value of what we're getting out of it. In 1, there is no new buildings, and for an additional $8 million, we get 2 new elementary buildings. Plus, it looks like we maintain everything in 1. Is that a kind of a correct analysis?
It is, and I talked about it with one of the other, like when we moved from 1 to 2, the opportunity of that is to say, okay, we're not spending $9 million on those infrastructure improvements, we're spending 80 because, we were no longer putting, some of that money into Holt. In the case of option C, by taking Holt, Diamonddale, and Elliott infrastructure, numbers out of the equation, that drives that $91 million down to about $65 million. And so that delta is where you start to see, that starts to open up the opportunity to start to look at some of those newer buildings.
And I think it would be great, growth-wise for the district too, with those 2 elementary buildings, because, our district is big because we got the Bermuda Triangle kind of in the middle of it, where, that's not our property in our district. So it just seems like for those geographical locations, there's potential for growth. housing-wise and whatnot, which is good. Was there anything that, from all of these groups that you talked to and the constituents, that just kind of resonated that, look, this is something that, we really got to make sure we include?
I think it's a great question, and I said when we met with the community task force sort of how in tune everybody was with very specific things about the facilities, and air quality is something that jumped up. HVAC issues and things like that, safety and security are those are probably the two biggest things that we heard the most about. Something that came up with heat, was very much front and center. Let's make sure we're investing in the east side of the district to the tune that we're investing in the west side of the district, and I mean, front and center. So to me, that was actually after we had this idea sort of in the background, and it made me smile a little bit to say, okay, here's a great opportunity to hit that head on from that perspective.
And to echo Trustee Jennifer Lowell's comments, the inclusion of everybody is a key, and the HEAT group, was very inclusive to that, to include everybody. So thank you for those comments, and we'll take that to heart.
So this evening, are you looking for us to give you guidance into one of these options, or a dollar amount, or both?
Ultimately, yes, that's what we're looking for, to look at the three options, to land on one, knowing there's still work to be done, but, in the range of things, and as I, previously announced to you, I think number 3 is the one to go with, because if you're going to get the most for the district, you're going to get the best for the district, you're going to include the most for the district, dollars there that we can certainly have all-inclusive. You take care of your safety, your security, you're getting 2 new buildings online, plus you're creating new learning spaces with the air conditioning, the air quality. To me, as your own rep, that's the one I would land on. I live in this community, and I hear people talking, and we need to know, the board needs to give us a direction, so when we talk to communities, they say, hey, what's this all about? Because these questions are coming out to us, and we need to start thinking about that, because we need to have answers and allow people to know the direction that the district's going.
And the $148 million would equate to what in the millage approximately? You probably don't have it exact, but...
Yeah, I don't think that we've had Baker Tilly run that specific scenario yet. I think we just wanted to say what is a realistic number to get this done, and there's parts and pieces that we've talked about. Maybe we need to add in some additional performing arts improvements at the junior high. Maybe that means that we need to take some other things out. I think the district is exploring, are there some other ways, creative ways that maybe we can get some of the lighting improvements done from an energy standpoint as a way of sort of taking that out of the equation of the bond. So there are a lot of moving parts to say, we could certainly have Baker Tilly run, up to $148 million and see what that looks like, and certainly report that back.
Plus or minus 8.2, 8.3 is what I think it is.
Okay.
It would still be tax decrease.
Yeah, that means that we're going from 10 mils down. Whatever we're doing, we're trying to go down, right?
Yeah,
in our
you're
millage.
still down, approximately 2 mils.
And don't get me wrong. When you drive up to the junior high, and it's going to be beautiful, there's pool improvements, but then you have a field and other fields, a lacrosse area, a softball field. I mean, all that area needs to be redone too. So that's something to think about. Even if we have an outdoor classroom out there, you know what I mean? It's just.
Yep.
I guess my biggest worry still is growth. And we've got at least three new condo apartment complexes going in on the east side of town. And those schools are already packed. There is no room in those schools. Well, I love the idea of having less transitions. I'm just really worried about space. And if we made two buildings, elementary schools, bigger, holding more, then that creates an inequity there amongst all the schools as well. But yeah, there is no space in those schools, especially Elliott, Sycamore. There's no room.
As you look at the 5 elementaries that you have now are roughly set up as 3-section buildings. So, that's sort of like gives you about 15 teaching stations per grade level. You know, we've got to factor in special education and some of those other types of things. So, you know, I think looking at, you know, adding that additional section, you know, to 2 of your buildings, and I think that can help with the growth factor. And I think making sure that we've got that we're right-sizing those 6, 7, 8 buildings can also sort of help you guys when it comes to absorbing some of that growth as well.
So has there been discussion with the township about other potential growth and other potential
not specifically
neighborhoods or apartment complexes or things like that? One of them that's been recently approved was approved for
3,000 vacant lots in Delhi Township right now that could be potential buildable.
Yeah. I guess growth is my concern, and fitting all of these kids into the buildings, even when we're done, because I don't want to be in a situation where we put a lot of money into these and get all these upgrades and make these grade changes, and then we're still too full.
completely understand.
If you look at the map, and you know, the island in the center and the landmass around Diamonddale, potential of growth in that area is huge. So if farmers start selling and developers come in, you could probably see that growth, because if you look at surrounding areas and watch where the growth has traveled, it really is starting to spur off in all directions.
There's also a really huge chunk there that's not ours that goes to.
Yeah, you have 4 different school districts out there, so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, you know, one matter of detail, you know, as we go through the Department of Treasury process, that those teaching station counts in that capacity study is actually a really important part of the exercise. And so we're working on getting an updated enrollment projection to see what does your 5-year growth projection look like. And they evaluate things like new housing starts and live birth rates, and, you know, they factor in a lot of that information to try to understand where you're going to be in 5 years. And we can build about 15% additional capacity, you know, over your 5-year projection. We can't build any more than that. And that's just as a way, it's a check and balance to say, is this the right proposal for taxpayers, making sure that you don't overbuild or underbuild for that matter. So that is an important part of the exercise of going through Treasury that we'll need to do.
And then the only other thing I would have to add is some of our schools have mold problems, and we've done a lot of abatement. We've done a lot of pulling out and a lot of remodeling to negate that and get rid of that problem. But as somebody who has mold allergies, I'm here to tell you it's still there. And I worry that the lack of getting that taken care of and working on other buildings as opposed to that could come back and bite us as well, and would not be healthy for the staff and students. But something just to think about.
We will, you know, even in this option, so all of your existing elementaries will have heavy investment in HVAC systems.
Good.
You know, that's sort of that $65 million number that I talked about. A lot of that is sort of centered around mechanical, so, you know, airflow, indoor air quality. It's parking lots.
Right.
It's, you know, roofs that need to be done. You know, all that basic stuff. But a large percentage of that is mechanical.
Great.
So board, do we have a feel for which of these 3 options that we'd like them to proceed with?
I can tell you I like option 3 the best, although it does need some tweaks, as you know, that's been mentioned. But I think the potential to go to the middle school, high school model is just the best thing for the students. So I tend to lean towards option 3. Are you looking for me to make a motion?
Yeah, if you would.
Somebody else could do it. Okay, I move that we direct our bond team to look at option 3 as our this model.
I'll second with the caveat that we talk to students and parents and guardians in regards to that as much as we can.
I have a first and second. Any further discussion? Dr. Leonard, do you have Any comments?
No, I like the bond option 3 for much of the same reasons that were brought up here. I think it's, you know, it was something that even we talked about with just families that wasn't that they leave at 4th. I think, you know, 5th would be better suited, and then spend more time 6, 7, 8 at Washington Woods or, you know, middle school. I just think running them in and out in 2 years, that is a short period of time. The only thing I don't see is I don't see Sycamore talked about in option 3, and I may be missing it just because my eyes are starting to get a little blurry, but you know, that was talked about, I think, in at least option 2 and 1. So that would be my only caveat is, you know, Sycamore I think is needing some improvements as well. You know, and I've only been in there for daycare with my son when they do, you know, during closures and stuff like that. But that's the only thing I don't see discussed in this, and I think I would probably add, unless I'm overlooking it. But as a whole, I'd vote for the 3rd option. I think it would be the more beneficial for students.
So just to speak to the Sycamore, if I may, you know, we would be looking at a similar level of improvement as we would with the other buildings. So that 0 to 6 year facilities need, you know, take care of parking lots and HVAC and lighting and things like that. Integrating safety and security, upgrading the playground as well. So that would be included.
Okay, I have a first and second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, board. We appreciate your time and effort tonight, and we're going to continue our work, and we appreciate being able to come and present.
I was going to ask, do you need guidance on the budget as well? Are we assuming the 148 with proposal 3, or do we do that separate?
Say that again?
Do we need to have a separate motion to approve the amount?
I don't think so, because I think you guys are going to go back and probably adjust this number. And I saw on your map, I think in early January, you're going to come back, or we have to approve something?
So we will need to hone in on that number next month because we'll have to have an understanding of what the scope of work and what the number is, so we can put together all the financial attachments for the Department of Treasury meeting. After the Department of Treasury meeting, you guys will be voting to basically start the official application review. So we have a pre-qualification review. We're asking you to give us sort of a nod of approval to say we've got the right scope and we've got the right dollar amount. We put all that paperwork together. We go to Treasury. They, you know, walk through it to make sure that everything checks out. And then we start sort of a month-long review process. So you guys would approve that process to go into that, and then your step after that in early February would be to actually call the election to put it on the ballot for May. So those are kind of the look ahead in terms of what the board action looks like over the next couple months.
And the election would be the dollar amount, correct?
What's that?
The election would be the dollar
It
amount.
will, yeah. You'll have the ballot language. We'll have the dollar amount and the millage rate information and things like that be right in the ballot language. And it'll also tell you generally what the allowable expenditures are in terms of, you know, the work that we're able to do. And then there'll be a lot of backup information supporting that. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you know, 3, we can run with 3 and probably, you know, bring you various options of 3 for consideration as well, and get a better handle on the financial impact. You know, is it 148? We've got technology as a piece that we've got to sort of roll into this as well. You know, we've got some technology dollars in there, but we've got to look at devices and things like that, which will contribute things. So that'll be the next layer of information.
Good. And I agree with Ms. Rothbell. I think that you put that athletic dollars in one bucket and then let the students and the parents sort of vet that out as what's important. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, see you in the morning. All right, congrats. Okay.
Next on our agenda is the student representative.
Thank you, President Perry. We have a new student rep. She's in the audience. She was actually selected today, and that's why she's in the audience and not on stage. But moving forward, Paige Tompkins, and Paige, will you give us a wave? She's an 11th grader. She is in the band and the choir. She's an active member of the GSA. She's a National Honor Society member, and she's on the ramp crew. And I think she's going to make a nice addition to our team. I'm aware that our other board student rep also competing on the Holt football team this season, and that may be part of his conflict at the moment. So we're still trying to determine whether we'll have the existing member continue with us, or do we need two new members. So, welcome, Paige.
Well, welcome, and I hope you have time for us. We sound really busy there.
Yeah, she's got great balance. So, yep.
Moving to 5.4, Dr. Hallgren. I can't remember if you guys are meeting or not.
I haven't heard of any meetings, and I may be out of the loop. Dr. Hornick, could you follow
They
up?
met last week. I'll see if I can get you the dates.
I think I've been taken off the email chain because I wasn't able to go for so long, but I should be able to attend them now if they're at the same time.
I can give you a brief update. The ISOA, I was not there, but I did see the minutes, and it was focused on the dilemma of virtual meetings versus face-to-face board meetings, and how quickly that changed. And I would just like the members of our public to know that prior to last week, it was thought to be acceptable to have virtual meetings. Then governor's executive orders were changed, and then it was not acceptable to have virtual meetings, and so we made it audible and ended up here. However, during that window of time, the lawmakers passed a bill that was signed by the governor approximately at 8 o'clock on Friday, and now it is acceptable. But changing at a last minute is not in the best interest of our public, so that's why we're still here.
Okay. Item 5.5 will need to delete as Ms. Dalton is not with us this evening, so we'll put that back on the agenda for next month. And then Ms. Bureau, if you could update us on the policy changes and give us an overview of what's coming at us.
Oh, there's a lot coming at us. There's been a lot that's been coming through the last couple of months. First thing, Title IX.
Ms. Burrow?
Yes.
Could you talk into the mic? I'm having difficulty hearing you all this way.
Can you hear now?
Yes, it's
Okay, so Title IX, there was a Title IX training I was invited to along with a lot of administrators, a lot of staff. I think there were 40 of us in the training. Everybody was certified as in Title IX. There's some additional training that many people can take for the coordinator position, for the investigative, and for the decision-making decision piece of Title IX. It was really good. There was a lot of information, but yeah, we had 40 people who all went and got certified, so that was a really good thing to have happen. We've had a couple, actually, policy updates sent through Neola. One of them, they were asking me, the policy subcommittee or myself, to just go back through, and they gave a review list of some of our policies and some information, an ACLU brief, along with some resources for us to look. So when we get a minute, I'll go back through those policies, pull them, and probably have a discussion with Mrs. Dalton and whoever the new person on our policy committee is. Mrs. Dalton, Dr. Hornack, and I met with Dr. Holt this last week for our fall update, which had 5 pieces of policy that we went over. They are all color-coded and lovely for you guys. We have not, they were not included in this month's packet. We will do an update on them for the next month, and I can give you a quick overview as soon as I find my pile. Two of them we had already touched on recently, and it was just updating them. There's one that it's just language, federal and state language that we had to update them on. The other piece of that was We also got, there was one piece of policy in there that was on face mask wearing, and we talked about whether or not that would be something that we wanted to put in policy. One of our options is just to take pieces of that and add it to our handbook and into our other guidance for families. We did send the policy out to the schools. We're wondering, one, if it would add weight and help the staff to try and enforce face mask wearing if and when we go back. The other thought process was we want them to review it and see what their thoughts are before we tackled that and decided to bring it forth or not bring it forth. There were some administrative guidelines also on hand washing that were going to be reviewed to decide if that was something that we wanted to have or if we just want to kind of throw them in these are good practice guidelines. The last piece that we did, we're going to have some a special policy update on the Edgar, the financial changes that are coming. So we'll be meeting again shortly for those, and I have a lot of reading to do before we get there. And then the big topic of this week was the Open Meetings Act resolution, as Dr. Harnack said, has been approved. It's by the governor. I went to a webinar on Friday given by MASB. I forwarded everybody a link to the webinar. It's about 45 minutes. You guys have it too. You really should read it because there's some things in the law for the new meetings act that we didn't have before. So this year, as long as we're under the COVID things, we can go back to having virtual meetings as of January 1st. If we have anybody who is not at a meeting, has to be for specific reasons, either active military or illness, and then the year after that is only active military. So we have to go back and relook at the policy in regards to call-in participation and voting. That is going to be readdressed. And on that note, Neola was hot on it, and within 24 hours of that, sent out a resolution for us regarding the Open Meetings Act. I had it printed and set on your desk. I don't believe we have anything going on this month that we would really have to push this tonight, so take your time looking at it. The resolution for next month, we will probably want to adopt that. So you'll have an email from me that has a copy too of the webinar, the handouts, and a summary sheet of all that. I'd encourage you all to read that. And I think that's it. Any questions on any of that?
So, beginning January 1st, the virtual is not an option?
No, the virtual is still an option as long as we are still under
The circumstances. It's item number 4.
correct. As long as we're still under that. But if for somehow it gets lifted for a particular area, then no. Does that make sense? So as long as we are still in an area that is dictated to be a state of emergency, then we can still meet virtually. If you are in an area where you are not, then no. Does that make sense?
It does now, but
I really wanted to give you guys the policy. I printed them twice, what policies we touched, but I can't find it. So you have 4 policies that are going to be coming at you for first reading. I'll email those to you now so you have time before the next board packet to look at them.
in this resolution is 1, or is that separate?
4 plus this resolution.
Okay.
Are there questions on anything? There's a lot. I'm busy.
Yeah, I kind of want to say thank you, but then again, I don't. But thank you.
So I will stand there, but there's maybe another policy person coming in.
Okay, we'll move to 5.8, the appointment of treasurer. Board, as you know, Mr. Bakken was served in that capacity as treasurer, and due to his resignation, we need to appoint a new treasurer. So I would take some names, suggestions, volunteers.
I could do it, but just with the understanding that I'm a biologist, not an accountant.
The others?
I'll make a motion for Dr. Helgen to be the new treasurer.
I should open my mouth, huh? No, I'll be happy to do it. I might have to lean on Ms. Harry for some accounting lingo. I'll also be leaning on my wife, who actually is an accountant, so.
Okay, so did you second that?
What's that?
Did you second that?
I'm not seconding my own.
I'll second it.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I also believe we have to appoint an MASB rep as well.
We do, because there's, the yearly meeting is coming up next month, so there'll be some voting that the rep has to do.
I'm sorry, Jill, did you say the meeting is going to be online, MASB?
Yes, it's online this time.
That, again, is a position that Ben had held.
Yeah, I did it for a couple of years, and then Ben, I think, has had it for the last 1.5 years, yeah. I can do it again if nobody's really wants to do, but if somebody is really compelled and wants to do it, then, it's yours.
If it's going to be online meetings this year, I'll do it for this year. Sometimes I have trouble with the travel to the location, but it shouldn't be a problem if it's online.
Okay.
I'm volunteering for all sorts of stuff, aren't I?
I'd entertain a motion to appoint Dr. Halgren to the MSAB board.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
I have a first and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Christine, could we notify them of that change as soon as possible, because they send out about a month in advance a really big, thick packet of policy and legislation that he'll need to vote on next
I'll
month.
let them know tomorrow.
I'm getting a thick packet of policy. Yay.
All right, we'll move to your report, Dr. Hornak, the superintendent's report.
I'm looking for a volunteer. No, I'm just joking. Okay. Friday was Boss's Day. I'd like to thank you all for your ongoing support. As noted, you have a card on each of your desks. Thank you for that. I'd like to congratulate Kim and her team for a clean audit. That's wonderful. I'd also like to thank Jeff Miller, Scott Gottlieb, Kevin Galbraith, and Christine Lopez for visually bringing this space to life. Okay, we conceived of an idea of putting us in a large space 6 feet apart with microphones and a lot of moving parts. We are on, the internet. We've got a screen that's showing the public, just a lot of moving parts, and it turned out to be wonderful. Our hotspots have arrived, and we've issued 70 out of 125 hotspots. So we are getting the tech in the hands. Speaking of tech, our tech numbers were as high as 1,500 tickets, work orders. We're down to 85, and each day that continues to shrink. Across the district, mental health continues to be focused. You've seen in the Peak at the Week that I continue to add resources to the body of the email. So someone doesn't have to go into the Peak at the Week. They can find a resource right on that page. This is Principals Month across the district and the nation. I urge you and our public to consider sending our principals a note of appreciation. It doesn't take much more than a thank you. Okay, they're doing a lot of great work behind the scenes. We continue to do well checks. Mrs. Lopez and I have been going in and out of our schools, dropping off goodie bags to the office staff, continuing to do those well checks. Our partners at the Delhi Township Fire Station created fire prevention videos. Those have been distributed to our preschool, our K-1 teachers, and our 2-3 teachers to use as curriculum, as October is Fire Prevention Month. I was going to mention the Title IX training, but I'll just say that we did have a nice group of professionals engage in that. It was wonderful. You can read the bulk of my report, but I do want to go on and say that we've added a key question to a number of our interviews, and it goes like this. During the 2015 school year, black students represented only 15% of the total United States student enrollment, but they made up 35% of the students suspended once, 44% of the students suspended more than once, and 26% of the students expelled. The U.S. Department of Education concluded that this disparity was not explained by more frequent or more serious misbehavior by students of color. And the punchline is, why do you think this continues to happen? And so we get a variety of responses, but we're really, trying to drill down on, why is it out of balance? And it's out of balance in Holt Public from time to time. And so this is something that means a great deal to us, and we're going to continue to take it head on. Additional items to bring forward. Our Holt Equity and Access team has never been so energized and organized. They are doing incredible work right now. Special recognition goes above and beyond to our outstanding faculty and staff that continue to educate during these unprecedented times. Our food service team is now serving over 10,000 meals a week. It's just absolutely incredible. And our tech team behind the scenes continues to work nonstop to complete work orders and tickets. That continues on weekends. The Holt Public Community Task Force was as large as 65. There's still 65 names on the list, but we're getting about 35 that are weekly attending that group. I have that Delhi Township, Holt, Diamonddale Delhi Township Community Task Force. We've met 33 consecutive Wednesdays in a row working on COVID communication in an effort to keep us all safe. I am proud to be a member of this team. As you declared racism a health crisis, that is absolutely incredible. I've been on tour a little bit virtually, external presentations. I was on the Make Meaning podcast, that's out of Detroit. I was at Athena Wynn presenter, and I was one of the superintendents who was presenting to a group of women leaders, and I presented to the Holt South Lansing Rotary last week. I also networked with the board president, not the board president, the college president at Lansing Community College. And in accordance with the language in my contract, every 2 years I need to provide the board a medical assessment of my health. Okay, I left that on your table, President Perry. To that end, I recently provided the board president a letter from my doctor verifying that I'm fit to continue to serve you and our learning community. So I think that HR is getting to the next one. This one is really interesting. While we are certainly in a virtual delivery model, we have 855 kids on campus district-wide. 352 athletes, 130 band members, 96 in childcare. Choir hasn't started, but will be starting this week with 30, and 247 of our kids are in and out of our classrooms each week. So I would estimate that to be between 17, 18, 19% of our student enrollment are on campus. It's capacity. That concludes the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. I have a few items. First off, I would like to welcome Dr. Leonard, and thank you for voluntarily serving on the board.
Thank you.
Very much appreciated. And Dr. Warnock, I don't know if you mentioned, and maybe I missed it, just to thank Mr. Miller for the facilities tonight. I don't know if you did not.
I did, but
okay.
The more we can thank him, look at this, you can see it. This is Jeff making sure we're all safe.
Yeah, so Mr. Miller, thank you very much for this evening. And also, I'd like to extend my gratitude and thanks to our teaching staff. This switch to online is not something that's easy for them to do, especially, switching the mode of education, but also, from a mental standpoint, you just, not being there with those kids on an everyday basis. It's difficult to do. So, again, thank you to our whole teachers. And just to remind everyone that, we are continuously reviewing about going back online or back face-to-face. Like Dr. Hornak had mentioned, we have 800 and some people on our campus at some point in time, and our decision to go back or not to go back is going to be made in November. I know not a lot of other school districts are talking about it now, but our time frame when we chose to do that is November, and we'll hear from curriculum a little bit later as far as our plan to go back. So that's my comments, and with that, we'll move to curriculum and an update on the extended learning plan.
First tab. To the left.
Good evening, Board. Hello. We are required per the Extended Learning Plan legislation to give you an update every 30 days at every board meeting. There are several items in your packet that we'll be reviewing with you tonight. We have the slideshow to go over those items. Specifically, you have a Word document after the PowerPoint that is the October data points for our update that we will be referring to. You also received a paper copy of an updated face-to-face implementation plan that was added after the board packet was sent. So we're going to start with, okay, so the things, just a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. Our extended learning update. We're going to go over some county data, talk about the, as Mr. Perry alluded to, the thinking of where we're at for the return to face-to-face instruction, and then we'll wrap up with an enrollment update.
So I'll get started. Just to reiterate what Jess said, we kind of took the required components that we were being asked to provide updates and kind of put it in a one sheet that is a little easier to follow. Two things I want to add is we're going to come back at the end and ask for a vote to support the continuous learning plan after go through it. And also I want to add that you also had on your table a packet from the survey results. And so then I was not able to get that in the packet because it didn't close before the packet was due. So you have those in front of you, and I will walk through them with you as part of our update tonight. So I'm going to skip the first row and go to the second, right to academics. So one of the areas that we are asked to talk about is academic goals. And it's very consistent with what we would do for our district improvement plan or our school improvement goals, but it's tailored to remote. And again, our goal is for all of our students to be 100% on grade level. And so what we have chosen as a goal is to use our benchmarking assessments as a starting point of saying where we want kids to be. Along with stating the goal is how we're going to monitor or the progress that our students make towards those goals. So as I shared, we did benchmarking K-8 that happened earlier on the year, and it's getting wrapped up. And the benchmarking went through, and now what our buildings will start doing is providing service to those students, and they'll be providing progress monitoring to those students to help show that they're moving towards the progression of our goal. When we reconvene again in February, I believe that is a point where we will provide updates on how our kids are moving towards their academic achievement. One of the pieces that is very similar to if we were face-to-face is what systems do we have in place to support our students that are struggling. And as Dr. Hornak had mentioned, I cannot capture everything that goes into what happens day to day, and the big piece is that social and emotional piece, but for this purpose of this report, it's going to be focused on the academics. And so kids are getting extra support. We call it Tier 2 or Tier 3, just like we would face-to-face. They're getting progress monitored. And also, as was shared in the superintendent's report, we have students coming on campus and get support. So not only are they coming on campus to get academic support, they're coming on campus to get some social emotional learning support or one-on-one time with some of our support staff. So again, the second, third, and fourth row is captured in academics. One thing that is a little different as we shift to 912 is we'll be using exam data to measure if kids are on grade level or not. So very similar to the academic report that we provide if face-to-face, but it'll look a little bit different through this remote experience. So any questions on the three components of the academic, the goal, the progress, and what we're doing if students are not where we want them to be? Okay. Yeah, I don't.
All right, attendance. Attendance is a little different in a remote environment than, obviously, than when we're face-to-face. You can see TK6 at the bottom of that document. There's a table that shows percentages. The way we calculate attendance when we're virtual is how many times per week the teacher has what the state defines as a two-way interaction with a student. And there is a list of what counts for those attendance interactions. So what you have are the percentages of students, TK6, who have a P marked in Power School, meaning they had one of those interactions with their teacher 4 out of 5 days a week, which the state would count as a full week of attendance for those students during virtual learning. So the number I average run around 94% per week. Once you look at all the buildings and across all the weeks, not much shift between the weeks for TK6. But attendance rates are fairly high. I don't speculate relative to what they typically are. It seems higher percentage-wise.
Yeah, I was going to try to ask you that, but I shouldn't.
Yeah, I did double-check with 712 to see what it is relative to previous years. With K6, it does appear higher. I have some hunches about why that might be. When we hear the enrollment data, it might make a little more sense to you in that our families who are in TK6 have committed to the remote environment and are ensuring their students are interacting as they are expected to.
So in the previous face-to-face regime, would we be doing this, like, let's say Ellie at 94%? Is that 4 out of 5 days for 94%? Or is it, that would be 5 out of 5 days, right?
The way attendance was calculated prior to remote learning, and it's tough because even the way the state thinks about the data is different. We would do how many days of school they have missed, what percent of days they've missed in a certain window, and now we're looking at a per week engagement. So it's just a different type of calculation. I would say our engagement rates for TK6 are equitable to what we would expect in a face-to-face environment if we were doing apples to apples. 712, so that's on the back of your sheet, or scroll down a little bit. Now these numbers I did compare to our face-to-face, and when you do across grades and across weeks, we're holding at about an 85% of students who have two-way interactions with their second-hour teacher. That's how we're tracking it for people accounting membership. It's with their second-hour teacher. That's just because the state requires us to only have one teacher that maintains those two-way logs. For any of you that have spoken with teachers, you'll know it's a very laborious process to maintain those two-way logs, and I really appreciate the work our teachers are doing, that level of bookkeeping. But they track those two-way logs with students. This is the percent of students that are two-way interactions a week with their second-hour teacher, and it ends up being about 85%. Our first week, the 9-9 to 9-15, is our lowest week, which My hunch is we were still working to get devices and hotspots to students. So to see the number kind of flatline and plateau, at least tells me that the students who are engaging consistently, and the students who are not, we do have systems in place where we are reaching out to them and trying to find out what the barriers are to their participation. I did compare that to previous calculations where we did last October, the number of students who had missed 15% or more days of school, our threshold at that point, which was 5 days. And those numbers ran around 90% of our students were hitting attendance at 85% or higher. So I'm seeing about a 5% difference in what we see in face-to-face instruction. And it's comparing apples and oranges as far as how the data is calculated, but that's my hunch. As far as it's 85% is I believe relatively high, but we are still trying to figure out what's preventing some students from engaging. And keep in mind that they have to hit that threshold of 2 Ps in Power School a week for 2 two-way interactions. Some of these students are interacting, just not the 2 times a week. So some of it is just getting them online every day, doing the things they're supposed to do. Overall, attendance-wise, and Steve can speak to that a little more when we do surveys, because the students have been fairly positive in their feedback about school, but we're seeing consistent numbers. Any questions on attendance?
Yeah, when we look at the seniors, they're running, there's 25% there that aren't engaged, and it's their senior year. I guess my question is isn't it alarming that 25% of our senior class may not make it through graduation?
Well, before we draw some conclusions from the data, we probably want to dig in and see, is this just their second hour they're not participating in? Is it multiple hours? Remember, some of our seniors, the only requirement left for them is economics, and they may not have that second hour. So whether or not it affects our graduation rate, it remains to be seen. But what we could dig into is, are those students participating in other hours? And with the launching of Power School this year and parents having access to the parent portal, the feedback I'm getting is parents have quick, fairly easy access to students' attendance and grades pretty regularly. So what we're keeping a close eye on is how students are performing those required courses and how that might affect their ability to graduate on time.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned because there's no tomorrow, if you will, right? I mean, they're racing toward a graduation date, and it's they're in front of them, and if they're not engaging, there's no time to make this up.
Well, in a typical year, when I pull our attendance rates, our seniors have the lowest attendance rate typically. Again, a lot of conclusions we could probably draw about why that is, and I think that's something that we could look into more and bring you more information on.
Okay.
The last piece that on my list is just is a part of our required data points to share with you, is the professional development and training that we have provided for teachers, parents, and students around virtual learning. We do have that documented in there for you. I see training in PD as an ongoing process with staff. We're being responsive to what we hear from them as far as what their needs are, where they're stumbling with certain tasks being very time consuming, and how we can get them the software or the accesses to help them. Parents and students, there's been upgrades to our district website with a lot of tutorials. We tried to really refine the tech support page for families to access. But what I'm finding is a lot of the support for students and parents are happening at the building level. So students are working directly with their teachers. We spent the whole first week of school focusing on, the direction was to focus on helping students get comfortable with the platforms we're using and do some specific training there. But as you know, we have certain levels of transience, so we do have students coming in that need training because they're new to a class, and our teachers are juggling that pretty well. But it is tough trying to keep everybody comfortable as students move in and out of our classrooms.
Okay. So like I shared earlier, you should have a packet that was on your table with the survey. And I want to spend a few minutes leading up to the process before the survey actually got sent out. So we learned a lot from the spring. And I realized how much work Ms. Lopez did in the spring after working through it myself. So thank you for that. So the survey was vetted through lots of different groups, specifically administrators. I believe some of you provided some feedback. We wanted to be really thoughtful, and we wanted the results to be actionable and something to do with, not just to say we did a survey. And so we had 3 different surveys. We had a parent-guardian survey, we had a staff survey, and we had a student survey. And after feedback from our principals, we landed that each of the survey would have 2 or 3 common questions. That was one of the agreements we had. Some of the buildings chose to add a few other questions that were specific to their building. So if you might have received a survey question that another parent did not receive, because that was the building. They also felt it was really important to leave space for the staff, the parents, guardians, and the students to respond freely. And so those are some of the criteria that we kind of landed on. It was also important, the buildings really wanted the opportunity to send the survey out, the principals, to be able to receive the information back to them and then go to their leadership teams and decide what data they're going to use to make action steps moving forward. So one thing that I will share with you either through an email or at our next board meeting is some of the action steps from the results that our building principals worked with their leadership teams on. It's not in here because they did not have time to meet with their teams yet. So those are a few things. So I'm going to go through the survey with you quickly. At any point, please stop and ask questions. So the first one, I just shared the questions, then I'm going to go right to the survey results. So the first question, again, is overall, how is remote learning going as a parent or guardian? And what I would like to highlight from this is 83% of our parents, guardians, responded that it's expected or better than expected or much better. So taking the 20, the 30, and the 33% landed on 83 of it's expected or it's going better than what I anticipated. What I would encourage that we'll talk about with our principals is we had 6% say it's much worse than expected. And so I think we owe the diligence to follow up and find out what about it is worse. And to give you a frame of reference, that's about 110 responses. So that's about 110 responses that I think that and again, the same with the 11%. There's 187 that said not as good as expected. So again, it's within reason. We need to do some digging into those and find out more information. Look for some trends or patterns, and maybe it's something simple we can fix for some of our parents or guardians in regards to that response. The next question had to do with the learning plans and the schedules and the work, and basically was it easy for your children to follow? And we had 76% strongly agree in a positive way in regards to this question. And to give you a frame of reference, that's almost 1,400 parents respond they agree or strongly agree. So I would like to highlight that again. We had 1% strongly disagree, and that's about 20 parents that we need to look into, or the 6%, 98. So I'm giving you a frame of reference beside a percentage as a number. So any questions on the parent survey? And again, as a parent, you might have had 2 other questions to answer. The building chose to put on their survey, which they really wanted to be able to do that. So, any other questions of parent guardian?
With the ones that responded with additional information, was it?
Okay. So I can catch after and we can find out building and stuff. Yep. So again, sorry, Julie.
With the comments that were left, was there a common theme amongst them? From the
that is something that I'll ask the principals to report out. I did not get
you
the
didn't get it. It went to the
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I believe the survey, we asked them to have it all submitted by Thursday, so the turnaround is pretty quick.
Okay.
Yep. All right, next one is the student survey. There were, I believe, 3 questions on the student survey. And the first question is, how's remote learning going for you? And I guess I want to start with saying, one thing that we will discuss is I would like to see more student responses. As with all surveys, we would like to get more responses. But, you know, we had, for the first 2 questions, a little over 1,000 students respond. I would like to get that number higher, and that might be an action step we talk about. But what I would like to highlight on the first one is, how is it going? And so 82% of our students said it's expected, much better, or expected than what going into it. So I think that's pretty positive. Looking at the yellow and green, the 12 and 6%, that is about, the 6% is about 65 students. That's much worse than expected. And I think, again, we owe the work to looking into that experience for those 65 and finding out more. And it could be lots of different things, but if we can narrow it down, that would be a great action step. The next one is about the learning plans, very similar. We had a very, very high percentage of agree or strongly agree with the learning plans, as 82% of our students. I will tell you, over the weekend, as I was putting the surveys together, I did notice some trends in some of our buildings. Our student voice was not, I don't think, represented fully, and so I believe some of our principals actually sent out the student one again, trying to gather more information. So those were those 2 questions. Then the third one, one of the things that I need to investigate further is we only had 762 respond to this question. So we had a little over 1,000 in the previous 2, and this one there's a big drop. And it's basically, overall, I feel I've been given blank, and it goes on to asking about work. You know, the positive is, you know, 70% say it's just the right amount. You know, we have 26% say too much and too little. So, again, I think we have 5,400-ish students, give or take. I think we need some more student voice to try to get these surveys, and so we'll problem solve around that moving forward. Any questions on the student one? All right, and the last one is the staff. Again, 2 common questions. When I say staff, I want to clarify, this is everybody that pretty much works and supports the building. It is the itinerates, and I apologize, I missed a group of paras, the lunch support, it was everybody. The buildings did break it down by particular roles so they can look at trends within their building. For the sake of this data report and where I was at on Sunday with it, it is all together. But I do want to say that of our responses, about 69% make up teacher response. So a good chunk are our teachers. So the first one, how is remote learning going for you as a staff member? Again, you'll notice that 91% of our staff said it's about what was expected, better than, or much better than. So I thought that was a pretty high response rate. Much worse than was expected was 1 person, and so we'll have to obviously investigate more on that. And then we also had about 9% say it's not as good as expected. So again, looking at the numbers, overall, I think this is a powerful question. Do you feel supported? I think, as Jess has said, I think they're working really hard. They're tired. There's a lot going on, but I do believe that a lot of support is being offered as much as possible, and 87% strongly agree that they're getting the support they needed. So I was happy to see that high of a percentage for them. So that concludes the surveys. Again, I want to reiterate the next steps is the building principals are taking their results and going to their leadership teams, and they're going to share the data with them, and then they're going to, if they see area of improvement, they will develop some action steps, and I don't have it in front of me, but I believe the next survey would not go out till after the holidays possibly, but I have to relook and see, so. Any general questions with the survey? From here. Okay.
All right. The next couple slides have to do with the county health data, and then after talk health data, we will ask for a reconfirmation of remote instruction. So you may remember several board meetings ago, Dr. Hornak had shared several documents from CDC as well as Ingham County with data point in them for how schools will determine or might determine, it's guidance, but not rules, should we come back face-to-face, and if and when we do, how we determine if we're in the lowest risk of transmission within school. It was a little bit of a scavenger hunt, but through several different websites was able to find all the data pieces that relate or pertain to schools. And I took the two different documents and highlighted for you where the data points fall on their spectrum as far as high risk to low risk. So for CDC, you can see the yellow highlighted data points put us anywhere from the lowest risk category all the way to the moderate risk, depending on which data point you're looking at. For the Ingham County guidelines, we are both medium risk as well as very high risk because there are two different data points used to determine that, and the data points put us in different categories. We will be continuing to look at this data and bring it to you as a part of our decision making for how we determine the safety of our staff and students and bringing them back face to face. I thought it was helpful though to actually pull the numbers. I hear a lot of districts talk about the data, I hear the state talk about the data, but rarely do I actually see the data pulled. This represents last week's data. As you're aware, the number of cases is changing currently. One of the data points has to do with percent change week to week. We barely scraped into the moderate risk of transmission in schools category at a negative 0.66, which is really close to zero. Once you get to zero or above, you go into the higher risk, and there are changes in that percent change that potentially would put us in that category at this time. We are in the very high risk category for the number of cases per million in the county, and I have heard Linda Vale, Ingham County, say some of that has to do with East Lansing and the number of cases there, but we are seeing an increase in cases in all of the county, not just in East Lansing. So something to keep an eye on is that number of cases per million as well. So I want you guys to see the data and sorted it as well into the categories. So this data is the same data that you just saw. It just shows you we have one data point that puts us in the lowest risk, we have one data point that puts us very high risk, and then we have multiple data points in the middle. So the fun thing about data, it's never clear and clean. You got to use the data to kind of tell your own story. What do we want to do with it? At this point, though, if we want to say we're making data-driven decisions, we will need to consider the data points that were provided to us in making these decisions. Any questions on the county health data?
Jessica, is that getting more, I assume you've been looking at this week to week. Have they been making improvements in their presentation, or is it the same kind of garbage in, garbage out information?
It was surprisingly difficult to find the isolated data points for this. Once I found the sites that the state referenced, so covidactnow.org and mystartmap.info were the sites that had the data points that matched the language, but it took me some digging to find those points, and then once I found those sites, I had to dig to find Ingham County, our specific data. So it isn't bad data, but it's difficult to find, and in some cases, it is difficult to determine if it's weekly data or cumulative data, so that's not always very clear either. In this case, though, particularly when I got to the secondary factors of like beds available in hospitals, and that was very difficult to find as well. The top part is really easier. All right, so I think at this point we're going to reconfirm.
Yep, so at this point, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is the part where asking to reconfirm our extended learning plan, and If you go back to the first row, it talks about instructional environment. What is the recommendation? Our recommendation at this point is continue remote, and you'll also notice to continue to service our special populations in our buildings with unique needs. So that, from our understanding, needs to take a vote, Mr. Perry. And then from there, we open it up to public comment again, as that is part of the requirement within this plan. So I'll hand it over to the board, and then I believe we go into public comment for this.
Board, do you have those documents? Are there any questions of Jessica or Steve? If not, then I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to continue the remote learning plan at this point. The extended learning plan.
I'll second.
I have a first and second. Any discussion?
Just to thank the both of you. I know you're working really hard on this, and I particularly feel for you, Jessica, that sometimes it's hard to find data that even makes sense, much less fits your needs. So thank you for all that work.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. The next part of our meeting is public comment, but this public comment is only toward our continuing learning plan, and no other subject matter can be discussed at this period in time. So if there's anybody who would like to address the board regarding the extended continuing learning plan.
So all of this that was just presented is available for public comment, so that then your statistics are available for public comment. But your statistics do not break it down by age groups. And my husband and I follow this very strategically, because what they say is all these numbers, but if you break it down by age groups, the under 18 years of age group is like 0.011 or something to ever even get this. It's your over 55, your heart disease, your diabetes, your asthma people that are more prone to get this, and then you can predict or not predict how sick they're going to be. So all these numbers don't break it down by age groups. So by extending the learning, you're protecting the teachers, the parapros, the lunch people, the bus drivers. You're not really protecting the students, because the students, it would be rare. It would be 000 or whatever the number is. So these numbers are not true numbers. All your hard work is not telling us what's happening with the students. I want to protect the teachers, believe me. I want to protect parapros, the teachers, the bus drivers, the lunch people. But we have to think about the students too. And how can we do that?
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, we'll close the public comment section and move to the county health. We just approved it for this month, so we'll approve it again next month.
All right, we did want to share, and there's a new version of this. This is the printed version. I think it has weird 3 staples in it. Sorry about that. The process we're going through and getting feedback from staff in discussing a transition plan to bring students back into the buildings. There have been some changes since the document was shared with you in the original board packet last week. This document is meant to capture a lot of conversation, and what's tough about a transition plan when you really are working with all your stakeholders is the conversation is very fluid. So we're making changes to this document pretty often, and one of the processes we went through is Steve and I met with each building, all of their staff, so not just teachers, but any staff member that wanted to come, and went through this process of how we would bring students back into the buildings. There are no dates on the process. You'll notice it has numbered steps. We don't want to raise anxiety about the when or the speed at which we'll make the decision, but we wanted to have in mind a procedure we would go through to ensure that it is a well thought out, intentionally designed process to bring students back into the building. One big shift after we had those meetings and got feedback from stakeholders, originally a philosophical commitment we had made was to ensure no teacher was required to teach both online and face-to-face at the same time. Interestingly, as we met with our staff, they started to process that what that meant for them is that particularly for our elementary and middle school teachers, that they were going to potentially lose the students they've been working with since the beginning of the year, because we would be in effect dividing into online sections and face-to-face sections, and teachers would be reassigned accordingly. Teachers were uncomfortable with that. They want to keep the kids that they've built a community with. They want to continue working with the students they know. So after a lot of conversation at this point, we believe the direction, the guidance we are getting from the people who will be in the classrooms doing the work and running the buildings is they would prefer to do their best to keep their cohort of students and instead work with us to try to mitigate the pressure of doing both environments at the same time. So for example, I went into a CI classroom today at the junior high. I watched Deanna Regland. If you know her, she's amazing. I watched her teach 3 students face-to-face and 1 student remotely. She has structured her classroom so that there are students with their desk shields facing forward. There's a Chromebook set up here with her remote student who can watch, and there's a Chromebook set up at the front so that it can see her during a Google Classroom while she teaches. So she has adjusted her instruction in order to meet the needs of both in some pretty creative ways. That would be something we would take very seriously, in that we are very concerned about teacher burnout. We're very concerned that our people are exhausted, and whatever process we use in going forward, we need to keep that in mind. So that is a change from the original document we've given you, in that as that's become a priority and as we work with the HEA on how our teachers will shift into face-to-face, there's a lot of interest in maintaining the current students they have, which would also potentially reduce the number of live bodies in their classroom. Some would be remote, some would be in front of them, which I think some are more comfortable with that idea too, of having a reduced number of students in a classroom. This is all just planning and thinking. None of it is a final made decision, but it was important to us that we're having these conversations, we are putting things in writing, we're asking people to provide feedback to us. One of our next steps will be to have a community forum focused towards TK6 to talk about what it might be like for our younger grade levels when they come back into the buildings, and how we can best ensure safety and comfort for everybody involved. So you have that document, but I can't guarantee that even tomorrow it will read the same. We will continue to share it with you. I think David has shared it with feedback Google form so that you can continue to give feedback on it. Just know that what we see really in our role here is to be good listeners and to try to provide the safest, most comfortable transition for all of our stakeholders back into a face-to-face environment.
Yeah, I want to add one little piece, and just captured almost all of it, is under the district commitments. That's where we're really looking to make it as very transparent as possible to our public of what it will look like when you go back face-to-face. We do not want to have a misconception that it's going to be like it was in October or November or December, whenever last year. It's going to look very, very different. And I think what we have learned from talking to neighboring districts that maybe are a couple weeks ahead of us, or talking to Heather at Midway, who's got a building up and running with almost 100 kids, what things they would have done a little bit different when they reached out to their community when giving people or the parents the option. And so that is taking a lot of our time with, and it's really good work with asking teachers for feedback, like how do we paint this picture as clearly as possible? And I think that's a big intention of the forum or the community piece, is to walk it out with our community that choose to attend versus just getting it on a piece of paper and trying to read through it. So that's a commitment that we have to our community to make it as clear as possible.
Do you have any questions on just the thinking that's on those couple of pages there?
I don't have a question, but I have a statement.
Sure.
I meet with the regional teachers of the year once a month, and 8 out of 10 of them are going back virtual. It's a hybrid, and they are required by their districts to teach online and then in person or vice versa, and they are literally there from 7:30 to 6:30 at night teaching, and I don't want that to happen.
Yep.
2 of those districts have shut down completely because of teachers and students being infected, and I don't want that to happen either. So I appreciate the fact that you are listening to the teachers and what they want. I understand the fact that they don't want to lose their kids, and I don't want Reed to lose her teacher either, but to make everybody safe and not to have them teach 12 hours a day. And there's one particular regional teacher of the year that I'd like you guys to talk to, and what's happening to her in her district. I think that would be pretty eye-opening for all of us.
And unfortunately, it's not an uncommon story right now.
Right.
For districts that are kind of trying out that hybrid and trying to ease back into it. And, we both have spouses that work in education as well, and we're watching how that's going. And I have very real concerns for the mental health of our staff. So we're definitely keeping a pulse of that and trying to take their feedback, and at the same time, them through like, how would that work? What would that look like? And maybe there's creative ways to implement that thinking while also reducing the work burden on teachers. And that's kind of what we're doing with our teachers, is trying to figure out how to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
This plan focuses a lot on instruction, and I guess my question is, where's the other piece? I know it might not be your responsibility, but how do we get kids transported? How do we get kids fed? How do we resume all athletic programs? So I guess the question is, where's that piece? It might not be your responsibility, but
It all ends up feeding together. So you'll notice this process for this document, there's a hyperlink to the Return to Learn plan and linked protocols. And Steve and I actually have a meeting time tomorrow to go through that plan, which I don't think we've shared it with you since August. We would now need to go through all the protocols and all the language to update it to reflect this thinking. What that will mean is going through an initial time to update the language where we are right now, but then meeting with the directors of all those departments and talking about where they are, what do they need, what it would take to get buildings ready. It really is a very concerted team effort to get a building ready to see children again. So those steps are, while they're not listed on there as explicitly, they're very much built in. There's a couple lines that say there will be a building walkthrough prior to bringing students in that would have all stakeholders represented, and that includes the directors who would be overseeing the lunch process and transportation and all those pieces.
Yeah, I guess I just mean to say there's a lot of work that.
So much work.
I mean, I looked at Kim, and I think we spent 45 minutes talking about transportation and childcare today at a meeting, just trying to recognize no decisions, but just talking out loud, trying to hypothetically work through each situation.
Well, and as we talk to other districts who are feeling very similar, which is both comforting and not, what we're finding is there is no one path that is a continuous, easy journey, that they're having to make changes midstream and having to respond to feedback. And, one week you might be short a certain staffing group, and another week you might, so we are aware that as we continue down this path, there will never be we're done with that plan day. It will be a continuous editing process, trying to meet the needs of where we are in this experience. So in that way, we've worked probably more closely with our directors in other departments than we have on any other project. Yeah. Any other questions on this one before Steve does enrollment?
All right, just a quick update with enrollment, and speaking with Holly today, we will give official numbers at our November. It's taking a little bit longer with the remote process and the two-way logs, but I do want to just give you some general statements and some overviews. And one thing I want you to consider, and I was listening to Julie talk about building capacity and making sure we have enough room, is over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been very intentional with reducing sections in buildings to make it manageable for our support staff, our building principals. And so when we talk about reducing numbers or loss of students, some of those numbers we knew were going to happen. So for example, 2 K-4 buildings each went down a section. So that can range up to 50 kids that we are automatically down just because we made a decision to maintain 3 sections at each grade level. So I just kind of want to remind that and put it out in front. So overall, a majority of our loss of enrollment, well, let me backtrack. I believe it was in the spring, we started to project our student loss, and you guys landed on a number of around 250. I think you'll find at the end of the day or in November that that's going to be very close to where we land. So I just kind of want to throw that out there to you. But overall, at K-4, 4 out of 5 buildings lost students for enrollment, which we were predicted. Some of those were because of reduction of section. We had 1 elementary stayed the same. So, you know, even though the others went down, 1 stayed the same. We had a good chunk, 30 to 40, at our 2 middle schools, a reduction with enrollment there. Junior high was down around the 30s, and the high school went up. So, you know, we spent years first talking about the losing students at the secondary and working through that that statement itself. And at our high school, we're up 13 students to this point today versus last year at this point. Couple things that I think we predicted that we have of our loss of students, 20% is because of kindergarten lack of enrollment. We knew it was going to happen. We didn't know how many, but we have about 50 kids less right now than fewer than we had last year at this point. That's about 20%. And in general, about 62% of our decline in enrollment is K-4. So that shows you where a chunk of our decline is with enrollment. So overall, I think we're close to what we projected in the spring. We'll bring that number to you in November. You know, and I think, Julie, I appreciated your comment about the buildings keeping in mind the capacity that they can handle. I can tell you a lot of our buildings are about are the lowest they've been in a while as far as capacity, but the kids are not in the building as well. So any questions with enrollment?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I know you guys are working like mad. Have you started to think about next year's pre-K, K enrollment, if you're going to offer more sections, et cetera? Because there should be, if this is delaying, there should be a rebound.
I have a hunch that if we go back face to face, I think we'll have a spike in enrollment at the younger levels, specifically kindergarten and maybe first. So I would love to think to the fall. I'm not there. I'm more worried thinking about how we're going to accommodate, because I think we're going to have a spike if we go back face to face at some point.
Yeah, I didn't want to add to your workload.
Yep.
I just
again, it's so unpredictable. I mean, we look at patterns all the time with enrollment, and 1 year kindergarten at Diamonddale will be up 40 kids, and the next year will be down 8. I mean, the consistency is really hard to monitor, but I think we need to be prepared for all types of situations come the fall. So, any other questions? Okay. Is that it? That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll move to written reports. I don't think Dr.
Yeah, yes. No, he's here. It's over there.
Oh, all right, great.
Oh, you're hiding back there.
He's blending into the shadows. He's there.
You're all dressed in black in a dark room. It's really hard to see you.
Good evening. Good to see everyone. As usual, I'll keep it short for you guys. Month of September, I responded to 56 calls for service, made 19 school checks, 15 hours in community policing, and spent 21 hours in training. Big thing to highlight this month was on the school event side of things. On September 29th, we had a in-service training with the security team at the high school, and then we also had another one with the junior high the following week. With that training, we had a short discussion, and then we ran through scenarios. Discussion was evolved around radio etiquette, working at the front desks, greeting guests as they come into the building, and lockdown protocols. And then we went through 4 different scenarios where we worked with dealing with a disruptive student, adult causing a security risk in the building, searching for lost students, and responding to medical security. All the security staff, as usual, were right on point, and they're great to be on the team here. Good to have. For training, September 21st, I had our annual in-service training for CPR first aid, fire safety, and defensive tactics. And on September 24th, I attended a training where we learned about different warning signs and things to look for in juveniles who are at risk for doing a mass shooting or committing some sort of act of violence, whether it be within the school or in the community. Any questions? All right, well, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, board members, you have the HR report in front of you, and
Tag team.
tag team.
Yep. Good evening. In addition to the written HR report, Pete and I just have a few updates for you tonight. We continue to work to fill all of our teaching positions. As of today, we have 1 full-time teaching position open. The posting comes down in a few days. We will be looking to fill it immediately. We continue to be impressed by the hard work and flexibility of all of our staff during this time. We also wanted you to be aware that we continue to seek ways to support our employees, not just during this current situation, but extending beyond. We have been researching employee assistant programs known as EAPs. An EAP can offer someone to talk to and resources to consult with, and whatever it might look like, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a confidential service for the employee. Services include counseling for mental health needs, legal, financial, and work-life balance. So we hope to have more information soon about that, but we wanted you to be aware that we are continuing to seek resources to support all of our staff during this time. And then Pete, I think, wanted to give a couple updates before we take any questions.
One thing to note is, as we investigate the EAP, we're investigating it as an expense of the district, not an expense of the employee. And we've got a couple of companies that are approaching us, that we've approached them, and we're getting data, and hopefully we'll have a recommendation to the superintendent by the November meeting for implementation the first of the year. So that's exciting to our employees, and it's a real valid and valuable service we can render to them. I do have the pleasure of announcing that we have been able to fill the position of Director of Finance. You recall about a month ago I came in, or maybe 2 months, recommending that with a resignation in the finance department of our accountant, that we upgrade that position and look for an accountant as well as someone potentially to succeed Kim if she ever retires. The individual we've chosen is Michael Dunkel. He spent, I think, 8 or 10 years as the business manager for the Crawford Osable School District, which is up the Grayling area. And then about 10 years ago, he moved to Salem, Oregon, and has been the business manager and chief financial officer for what amounts to an ISD under their system. He wants wants to move back to Michigan. He's got family in Michigan and clearly has the experience and knowledge that we need on a long-term basis. And also through our interview process where we had stakeholders throughout the district, he has the personality that can fit in and interact well with our various stakeholders inside the district. So we're looking forward to him coming here in the middle of November. And if you have any questions of either Erin and I about this or anything else, we're here.
All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
Ms. Casgrove.
I don't, unless you had anything for the monthly financial packet, I don't have anything to report. We are moving along with salaries. We continue to match the budget. I go back and look and see where we were last year, since the majority of the district expenses are salary and benefits, and we are paying those. That is, we're kind of almost on. Where you can see it is not as much in facilities, not as much in transportation. There isn't any gas, the heat, those types of things. So we're just chugging along.
Okay. What will be the next budget update?
Well, I think we still do not have any guidance, as the auditor had said to you, on any of the COVID expenditures. As you know, when we had the Finance Committee, we did go through a list that we were trying to identify for the COVID expenditures. So I would hope that that plays out. Most of the time, we wait till the February board meeting because that is when we get the ISD allocations and know how the students are going to fit into the funding model at the ISD, and sometimes there's some big swings based on how many students that we have. So I would shoot for February. I do have to give Mr. Dunkel a little bit of runway. Right now I'm doing bank reconciliations, which haven't happened in about 15 years, so we need to do some chores too. But I was thinking February at the earliest.
Okay.
We will have a revenue consensus conference then also. And if you remember, the state of Michigan has given us a per pupil allocation that was the original allocation from last year before the $175 cut. January will be our first peek at this new year to see if that number will hold. So that's another reason to kind of pause to do the budget update.
Okay. Any other questions? Dr. Hornak with the calendar, there are items there that...
Yes, President Perry, I would just like to remind everyone we are off on November 3rd. That is Election Day, and we have a number of precincts that actually are voting will be taking place in our building. So for the first time, I think, in Holt public history, we had enough vision to say, let's take that day off. We're back together in approximately 3 weeks. Okay, so we'll be back together in a short turnaround, and that's November 9th. We bump into Thanksgiving break. School resumes on the 30th, and then we're back together on December 14th before we go out the next, approximately the next week for a holiday break, and then we're looking at 2021 already. That might be a welcome statement.
I, for one, am looking forward to 2021.
Yeah. And then just one other thought is, as a reminder, you have moved 5.7 to new business.
Correct. All right, we'll move to old business and new business.
I have an item. I think I've been asked, I don't think I've been asked, I know I'm asked, and I am curious as well, about the yearbook pictures for underclassmen and why we are not putting them in the yearbook. other districts have figured out a way to do this. We had a graduation in the middle of a pandemic. I think we can figure out how to have school pictures to be put into the 9 through 12 yearbook, as well as having pictures sent to a coordinator at the elementaries and the junior highs, the junior high and the middle school. My other question is there an advisor for the high school yearbook? Does that person receive a stipend?
So I can do a little homework and report back to you, but I do believe we have a yearbook advisor at the secondary level. At the elementary level, that is the office staff.
Okay, so is that person, the advisor, going to receive less stipend? Because I don't want that to happen for not putting pictures in the yearbook of underclassmen. And then also we've been asked to go ahead and send pictures to someone, but I don't think that's the best option either. So I was just wondering how we could figure out a way to have students come in and have their picture taken through Life Touch. And if it's too expensive, then maybe we can figure out a different way to have, because I think now we're removing 3 sets of classes from a year that they've actually participated in. And that's the feedback that I'm receiving, and I feel the same way.
Okay.
Trustee Robel, I have a little bit of information.
Who's talking?
It's Erin. Erin over here. So I'm sorry. The yearbook advisor did. She has been engaging with stakeholders as well as high school administration and actually HR this week. She's hearing the same thing that you're saying right now. They're working on a plan to safely allow people to come in and take pictures, whether it's outside or in any other way. That's been a conversation. She also reached out to other high schools in the area to see what their plans are. Some already had pictures taken, some are pausing until the spring, but she by no means, this is a planning process, and she has been in the process with us.
Okay, great, thank you. Because the email came out and said it's not happening, and then there's no feedback as to it might be happening. There's a process surrounding that, so maybe that could be relayed somehow.
Yeah, we can make sure, between Dr. Hornick and I, we can make sure we talk to her, but it was definitely on pause, but she's definitely engaging in the work to see how to do it safely, or if it's even feasible, so she's definitely engaging in that process.
Okay, because it's gone viral tonight, so
Okay.
I just wanted, it's growing, so the issue's growing a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, we can circle back.
Okay, thank you.
With the group. Yes. At this point, the elementary schools, the yearbooks we did pause on that as well, for the moment, just seeing what the winter and spring was going to look like for the building, so that was on pause at the moment as well.
Yeah, that one I can understand. You can't, that's a herd of cats coming in, and I understand that. But I also think the parents and guardians would be responsible enough to keep their kids, try to at least, separate or during time frames of when they could come in, that kind of thing. Just something, I'm sure this person has thought about that, but this is what's been asked of me, so.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, also under new business, at our Board of Education special meeting earlier today, we did choose to appoint somebody to the Board of Education, and board members, I would entertain a motion.
Do you want me to say the name?
Yeah, if you could.
I move to appoint Jesse Jones to the Board of Education.
I second.
Have first and second. If we could do a roll call, Ms. Bureau.
Ms. Robel?
Yes.
Dr. Holt?
Yes.
Dr. Leonard?
Yes.
Mrs. Bureau, yes. And Mr. Perry?
Yes. Very good. That passes, and I believe Mrs. Jones is in the audience.
Welcome.
Welcome.
I don't know if Christine has her credentials.
All right, board, we don't have a need to go into closed session, so that also eliminates going into open session. And we move to item 14.
I will make the motion to adjourn.
Support.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
This closes the regular meeting of the Holt Public Schools Board of Education, Monday, October 19, 2020.